Cahill at the Sheriff's Office to get an interview. And I went to see Mr. Cahill, and Mr. Cahill goes, well, you know, Kevin, we're not really hiring right now. There's just nothing going on here, and I don't know if we can help. And all of a sudden the door swings open, and Sheriff Lamb walks in and leans forward and goes, hello, Jerry. Hello, Kevin, nice to meet you. Hey, Jerry, take care of this boy. And the door slammed, and Jerry Cahill goes, well, Kev, we're going to call you tomorrow and let you know when your job's going to start. And later on, it's the only time I think the sheriff ever used the microphone or his radio in his car was when I took it to get it washed and I turned it on to Keno, full blast, changing from the country western music. And he got in his car, and that's when I knew his call sign was 100.
Right away and knock on his door. And I said, Sheriff wants to see me? And he said, yeah. I said, you know what it's about? He said, yeah, I know what it's about, but he'll tell you. So I headed to the sheriff's office, and he comes storming out the door, almost ran over me. He was going someplace, and he said, oh, he said, Dave, he said, and put his hand out, he's shaking my hand. He says, listen, he says, I'm promoting you to sergeant. He says, I want you to know, he says, the load's a little heavier, but the pay's a little more. And away he went. I just wanted to repeat that little story there.
My favorite Ralph Lamb story is when the cattle got loose from the old Horseman's Park at Stardust, and they went down the middle of the convention center, and Gary Beckwith and I were riding the paddy wagon out on the strip, and so the control told us, you know, keep them there for a while and everything. So you know, I didn't know what to do with the cows, neither did Gary. But he got out with his nightstick, and there was this huge longhorn, and I just knew Gary was going to get ran. Well, we kept calling, so what are we going to do with this? We're going to get some help. And then the next thing we know, these trucks pull up, and here's Sheriff Lamb with a trailer and a horse and his friends, and they get out, and he says, we got 'em, boys. And he swung his rope and took off, and we followed him. We led the way up there with the red lights all the way up Convention Center. But there's nothing like having a cowboy for a sheriff. We haven't had one since then.
This is Randy Bell. I grew up in town, and Ralph and the guys used to rodeo over at Twin Lakes Arena, which is now Lorenzi Park. And so we used to hitchhike across town. I lived down in the barrio at 28th and Stewart. And we'd work all day taking Ralph and all his guys' ropes off the steers all day. And our pay was they would let us ride the steers later that night. So I grew up kind of around Ralph and the guys rodeoing. And I went off and did a couple other things and turned 21 and thought I might want to become a cop. And my son was Metro, and he just left. And he had asked me one day, he said, Dad, how was it when you got hired? I mean, what did you guys go through because we go through hell now, you know, to get hired and backgrounds. I go, well, son, let me tell you how my hiring process was. I said I went down and had a meeting with the sheriff. I turned 21 and said, Sheriff, I'd really like to work for you now. I'd like to become a cop. And he said, okay. He said, he picked the phone up, and he called a guy named Jerry Cahill. Same guy that Kevin did. He said, Jerry, I'm sending a boy down. I want you to get him hired. And 3 days later, I was in a black and white. That was it.
Bumper, probably, for whatever reason. But I've known the sheriff since 1963, first time I met him. Bill Guthrie and myself used to have breakfast, Rose's Cafe in Twin Lakes. And Ralph Bose and Ralph Lamb would have breakfast in there every morning, and 4 or 5 days a week we'd have breakfast there. The closer it got to consolidation, we would talk to him and say, well, I don't know if we're going to be able, will we be able to talk to you and have breakfast with you? Pretty soon you're going to be the boss. And he just kind of joked about it and said, nah, there's no problem. He says, you boys just can come on in here. And I said, so what happens if we go to work and we arrest somebody and they say they know you? I related the story to Ralph a few minutes ago. And he says, Morton, he says, you just take him to jail. Don't worry about it. He says, if they know me, they'll have the right phone number and they'll call me. I says, okay, sir. The first night of consolidation, I'm driving this blue and white car with a blue uniform in the county. And we stopped this guy going all over Paradise Road. I mean, from curb to curb. I don't remember the gentleman's name. We stopped him. Needless to say, he knew Ralph Lamb. And I says, I know Ralph Lamb too. He said, no, you don't understand. I know Ralph Lamb. I says, that's really good. You're under arrest. And we towed his car and took him to jail. About 2 days later, I'm walking over to the courthouse going to court, and who's coming up but the sheriff? And I say, you know, good morning, how are you? He said, morning, I'm doing pretty good. I said, I arrested some guy the other night. He says, first night we consolidated, and he said he knew you. He goes, yeah. He says, he called me. He says, I know him. He says, you just keep putting them in jail. He says, they know the right number, they'll call. Anyway, that's the real sheriff right there.
I was a brand new councilman, and he called my office and asked for me to come meet him. And I went to his office, and he said, what's a nice girl like you doing in a job like that? And so, anyway, I gave him my usual story about how I was going to change the world, you know, in one fell swoop. And anyway, we became really good friends, and he told me one time that once he made a friend, they were friends forever. And I really understood what that meant. I wouldn't see him sometimes for years at a time, but when something would happen, he was just there. I don't know how he even knew anything was going on. And then just recently, when I got home for my little vacation with the feds, he called me, and he said, are you doing okay? And I said, yeah, I'm doing fine. And he said, I just want you to know that I meant it when I said we're friends forever. He said, if anybody gives you any trouble, you call me, I'll take care of them. And I just can't tell you how much that meant to me at that particular time to know that Ralph Lamb, because I was always in awe of him. He always has such a demand, you know, such a presence about him, and I just was always in awe when I was around him, so that he would take the time to call me and tell me that meant a great deal to me, and that's just the kind of person he is. When he's a friend, and I'm thankful he's mine.
Police stories. I just like to express my thanks for all the help that Ralph has given me and my family. I was just an uneducated young man come to town in the early 60s, and was fortunate enough to be introduced to Ralph, and he put me to work, which has provided me and my family with really a great living, and I can't complain at all. And I just, I know he's helped a lot of people here, and there's a lot of people here that he's helped who are not here. I'd just like to express my thanks to him.
Sheriff turned a few minutes ago. He said, no more speeches, no more speeches, you know. But, you know, there's so many stories we all have about working with and for Ralph. It's just, you couldn't cover it in just a brief period of time. But, you know, looking around the room here with all the friends that I've had an opportunity to meet and know through my relationships there with the department, as all of us working down there, I can't think of a better guy to ever work for. I've had a lot of jobs in my life since a very young age, like everybody else here. And I think when I was a deputy sheriff for a brief period of time was probably the best time I ever had. And I couldn't think of a better person to work for than Ralph. You know, one of the funniest things, at the time it wasn't too funny, but we used to have coffee in the morning at the Golden Nugget downtown with my dad and Ralph, and we'd go in there and we'd have a pretty good time talking about stuff. And one morning after Ralph had ran for a re-election and didn't win against McCarthy, we had coffee the next morning, and Ralph was always just unbelievable. And, you know, I looked up to him and my dad like I had two fathers. And, you know, I'm sitting there and Ralph says, hey, Johnny, he says, I don't understand something. I said, well, what is it, Sheriff? He says, I don't understand how I lost. And I said, well, what do you mean, Sheriff? What is it you don't understand? He says, well, everybody I talked to today all said they voted for me. To this day, I still remember that, Ralph. But But I'll close it up right now saying that we're all lucky to be here. We're all lucky to be here and having worked for Ralph. And there's just so much good that he did for this community back in the day and all the way through. And the whole Lamb family's been wonderful. And Ralph, all I can tell you is God bless and keep going. And we're right there with you, partner.
Okay, Sheriff, you like that, you're really going to love this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sheriff. Happy birthday to you. Ready? May you live 100 years. May you drink 100 beers. Get plastered, you good boy.